I want to start with one fact, not a headline, a fact. 1 year ago, the United States Navy made a decision that explains why 40% of the world's oil traffic is paralyzed today. And you won't hear about it in a single Pentagon briefing. They quietly pulled 4 ships out of Bahrain, 4 Avenger-class minesweepers, the only ships in the entire American fleet built with wooden hulls. Wooden, specifically so that magnetic mines couldn't detect them. These were the only ships in Fifth Fleet whose entire job was clearing mines, and the Navy sent them to the Pacific. Sit with that for a second. The most specialized mine countermeasures capability the U.S. Navy had in the region was withdrawn from the Persian Gulf 1 year before Iran filled the strait with mines. And right now, as you and I are talking, 2 ships, USS Chief and USS Pioneer, are racing across 2 oceans from Japan at full speed, trying to make it back to a door the Pentagon closed in its own decision 12 months ago. This isn't a coincidence. This is a pattern, and it explains everything you're seeing in Hormuz today. I'm Stephanie Taylor. This is Strategic Review. And you know what? What I'm about to walk you through over the next 20 minutes is not a story about underwater warfare. This is the story of how one bureaucratic decision in 2024 became a strategic catastrophe in 2026, and why even a $100 billion mega armada from 30 countries is not going to solve a problem that Iran created for the cost of a single destroyer. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't see Hormuz as a political crisis anymore. You'll see it as a mirror reflecting the strategic logic, or, if we're being honest, the absence of strategic logic in American military doctrine over the past decade. Let's start with the geometry, because without it, nothing else makes sense. The Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide, depth in the most critical sections drops to 50 meters. The actual shipping lane, just 2 miles in each direction. Here's what that means in practice. Every supertanker exiting the Persian Gulf has to thread through that bottleneck. One course. No room to maneuver. At minimum speed. This is, forgive my bluntness, the perfect zone for mine warfare. Geography built it for exactly this scenario. Iran took the opportunity. Since the 1980s, and I want to make sure that lands, this is not a typo. Since the 1980s, Iran has systematically invested in mine warfare technology. And here's what matters. While American military doctrine drifted toward expensive, impressive platforms, aircraft carriers, destroyers, missile defense systems, Iran was building infrastructure for asymmetric warfare. Not because Iran couldn't afford carriers, because Iran understood something that the Pentagon consistently refused to admit. I'm going to say this plainly. One mine costing $20,000 can destroy a destroyer worth $2 billion. One mine. No missile, no interception, no realistic defense. Sit with that math for a moment. This isn't theory. This is the basic equation on which Iran's entire Hormuz strategy is built today. Sit with that math for a moment. This isn't theory. This is the basic equation on which Iran's entire Hormuz strategy is built today. In Iran's arsenal right now, more than 6,000 naval mines. 6,000. I want you to stop on that number. Since World War II, nowhere on the planet in any narrow waterway has that much underwater weaponry been concentrated in one place. And we're not talking, obviously, about rusted iron barrels left over from 1944. Iran's Maham-3 and Maham-7 mines. These are, forgive me, not toys. These are smart weapons. The Maham-3 sits anchored to the seabed by a chain, hangs at its programmed depth, and waits. The Maham-7 sits flat on the bottom, specifically designed for shallow water, which means, as you can imagine, specifically the kind of shallow water you find in the Strait of Hormuz. Both systems carry magnetic and acoustic sensors. They don't need to touch a ship. They listen. They wait for a specific acoustic signature, the sound of an Arleigh Burke destroyer's propeller. When the signature matches, the magnetic field shifts, and what happens next is what Navy engineers call a bubble jet. Stay with that term, because what I'm about to describe is not a movie scene. This is the physics that, trust me, keeps American destroyer captains awake at night in Hormuz. Here's what happens. The mine detonates underwater, below the keel of the ship. The blast creates a massive gas bubble that expands faster than the speed of sound through water. The ship rises on top of that bubble first, for a fraction of a second. Then the bubble collapses. And here's where the horror begins. Thousands of tons of steel hull, with a vacuum suddenly forming underneath, cannot hold their own weight. A destroyer worth $2 billion, with 300 sailors on board, folds in half, like a pencil. From a single mine that cost Iran the price of a used pickup truck. And this, by the way, isn't theoretical. It already happened. In 1988, USS Samuel B. Roberts, an Oliver Hazard Perry-class frigate, hit an Iranian mine in the Persian Gulf. The ship nearly sank. 10 sailors injured. Since then, and I'm saying this with full seriousness, that incident has been the deepest institutional trauma in the U.S. Navy. And that's exactly why today, American Arleigh Burke destroyers, USS Peterson, USS Michael Murphy, others, move through Hormuz inside narrow corridors cleared by autonomous drones. With Aegis systems capable of intercepting intercontinental ballistic missiles, and completely defenseless against a $20,000 mine sitting 50 meters under their hulls. Picture that for a moment. The most expensive naval hardware on the planet, helpless against weapons that cost less than a used car. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through next explains how this happened. And here's the thing. It's not at the level of military balance. It's at the level of the institutional logic of the Pentagon, which, I'll say it directly, has consistently chosen impressive platforms over modest solutions that actually work. So 2024, the U.S. Navy decides to pull 4 Avenger-class minesweepers out of 5th Fleet in Bahrain. Wooden hulls, specifically so magnetic mines couldn't see them, designed for one mission. Stationed in the region for decades, crews who knew the waters of Hormuz by heart. And the Navy moves them. I'll repeat that, to the Pacific. Because American strategic priorities had shifted toward containing China. Now listen, I'm not saying that decision was stupid in a vacuum. Containing China is a real strategic problem. The Taiwan Strait is a real future battlefield. The logic of reallocating resources had its own internal coherence. I get it. But here's the problem. Iran was watching that decision. And Iran understood something American strategists, unfortunately, preferred to ignore. When the Avengers left Bahrain, Fifth Fleet lost its only specialized mine warfare capability. What was left? Independence-class littoral combat ships with bolt-on modules, autonomous drones, interim solutions. Is, sure, a working system, but it's not the system you want to be relying on when 6,000 mines are sitting in Iranian arsenals. Iran waited for the moment of maximum American vulnerability and laid the mines. And right now, as we speak, USS Chief and USS Pioneer are crossing 2 oceans from Sasebo, Japan. Full speed. And, forgive my bluntness, they're late. Because time in this conflict isn't measured in weeks. It's measured in shipping insurance premiums and in tanker captains deciding not to enter the strait today. Every day the Avengers are in transit, Iran wins. This, my friends, is the strategic trick that doesn't get explained in public briefings. Iran didn't close Hormuz with a military act. Iran did something much more elegant. Iran created the conditions under which the insurance market and the commercial shipping sector closed the strait themselves. Because the risk crossed a threshold of acceptability. Iran didn't have to sink a single tanker. The threat that Iran might was enough. 12 million barrels a day stopped moving. Oil prices jumped 30%. European energy markets shook. And Iran, one more time, didn't fire a single torpedo. I want to pause here and say something directly, because this is the point where most analysis pivots to flashy technology, drones, A-10 Warthogs, Apache helicopters. And this is exactly where we need to slow down. Listen, what's unfolding in Hormuz is not a story about technological superiority. And I want this to be crystal clear. The U.S. has the most advanced underwater warfare infrastructure in the world. Knife fish, kingfish, archerfish drones, without exaggeration, the cutting edge of engineering. AI systems capable of distinguishing a car tire on the seabed from a Maham 7 mine buried in the sand. Littoral combat ships with integrated mine countermeasures modules. A-10 Warthogs with 30mm cannons that can turn an Iranian fast attack boat into splinters in 2 seconds. Apaches with thermal cameras and Hellfire missiles. All of it works. All of it is effective within its limits. And, pay attention, all of it is useless for solving the underlying problem. The underlying problem is asymmetry, and this, in my view, is the most important point you'll take from this video. Iran can lay mines in hours. The U.S. clears them in weeks. Iran produces cheap mines by the thousand. The U.S. spends millions of dollars per clearance operation. Iran works at night, in darkness, from Ghadir-class stealth submarines. The U.S. operates by day, under observation, with autonomous systems that themselves require protection and support. You see what I'm describing? This isn't a symmetric conflict where the technologically superior side wins. This is a war of attrition, in which the side with the lower cost per action wins. And that simple truth, you can't buy your way out of it with billions of dollars in high-tech platforms. And right here, I want you to hear what comes next. Because, honestly, this is the most important sentence in the entire video. The US and Europe are right now assembling a 30-nation coalition. The UK is sending Sandown and Hunt-class mine hunters. Germany is bypassing legal procedures to deploy ships faster. France is integrating its sonar systems into Operation Epic Fury. The Netherlands and Belgium are sending elite diving teams. Gulf Arab states are opening their ports. Estimated price tag? $100 billion. $100 billion. And you know what? None of it is going to solve the problem. It's just going to buy time. Why? Because Iran doesn't need to clear Hormuz. Iran needs to make sure Hormuz can't be cleared fast enough. And on that specific task, Iran has already won. Not today. 1 year ago, when the Avengers left Bahrain, and one more time, so this lands, Iran didn't make that decision. The Pentagon did. Iran simply read the signal correctly and invested in the capability to exploit it. Now let's talk about the three futures. Honestly. Because this is exactly where public discussion gets cautious. And that caution is hiding the reality. Scenario 1. Diplomatic. Tehran agrees to a deal. Sanctions partially lift. Iran gradually shows where the mines are, and clearance accelerates. Sounds great, right? Now think about what this scenario actually requires. It requires Iran to voluntarily give up the only asymmetric weapon that genuinely works against the American fleet. Ask yourself honestly, how likely is that voluntary surrender? Scenario 2. Escalation. The U.S. strikes Iranian mine bases, Ghadir-class submarines, IRGC logistics. Iran does not respond symmetrically. Iran never responds symmetrically, but through proxy networks. The Houthis hit Bab el-Mandeb. Hezbollah activates against American bases in the region. Proxy operations restart in Iraq. And the regional conflict expands beyond what Washington, forgive my directness, can actually control. Scenario 3. Prolonged stalemate. The coalition works. Drones clear the channel. The Avengers arrive. The strait gradually reopens. But, and this is the critical but, Iran retains the capability to relay mines. And every few weeks an incident occurs that pushes insurance premiums back up and slows traffic again. That's not an open Hormuz, my friends. That's a managed bottleneck, one that Iran controls through its ability to periodically tighten it. Scenario 3 is the most likely outcome, and, unfortunately, the most damaging for the United States in the long run, because it institutionalizes American dependence on Tehran's restraint. In a context where the U.S. cannot publicly acknowledge that dependence, without undermining its own strategic position. Before I wrap up, I want to come back to that 2024 decision to pull the Avengers out of Bahrain. Because that decision, in my view, contains everything you need to understand about how American military doctrine arrives at its strategic catastrophes. And I want to be fair here. The people who made that decision were professionals, not idiots. They understood they were withdrawing a specialized mine countermeasures capability from a region where the mine threat is historically real. They made the decision inside a system of priorities that ranks containing China above every other task. And inside an institutional culture that, let's be honest, has consistently underestimated Iran's ability to translate asymmetric threats into operational reality. Each of those assumptions looked reasonable when it was made. Stacked together, they produced a moment in which the most powerful naval force in human history depends on two wooden minesweepers crossing two oceans to reach a strait blocked by weapons that cost $20,000 apiece. Sit with that one more time. I don't want this picture to slip past you. This is not a U.S. Navy failure. This is an American strategic planning failure. And that planning system, the same people, the same institutions, the same priorities, is now the body responsible for designing the response to a crisis its own logic made possible. That gap between institutional logic and operational reality is where strategic failures are born. And what we're watching in Hormuz right now is, I'll say it plainly, the clearest demonstration of that gap in the past decade. That gap between institutional logic and operational reality is where strategic failures are born. That gap between institutional logic and operational reality is where strategic failures are born. And what we're watching in Hormuz right now is, I'll say it plainly, the clearest demonstration of that gap in the past decade. 6,000 mines waiting in Iranian arsenals. Dozens, possibly hundreds, already in the water, in locations even Iran doesn't fully know. $100 billion coalition forming, the Avengers crossing the Pacific, drones patrolling, Apaches circling above the water, and the global oil market is just waiting. The door is technically open, but the hand on the handle belongs to a side, my friends, that is not in any hurry to let go. If this analysis changed how you see what's happening, share it with one person in your network who's still reading the headlines and missing the structure underneath. Subscribe to this channel. This is Strategic Review. I'm Stephanie Taylor. If this analysis changed how you see what's happening, share it with one person in your network who's still reading the headlines and missing the structure underneath. Subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you in the next transmission.